Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at Chiron in Aries. One of the factors that kind of led me to doing what I'm doing today is the real significance of Chiron with regards to some of the things that are going on politically and ideologically. So I wanted to just talk about what does it mean to everybody if Chiron is in Aries. And in all honesty, it's not even something that's written a whole lot about. So I thought I would include some of my resources. So Barbara Hand Clow does a book called Chiron, which is very good. However, she tends to focus very heavily on natal Chirons. So, but it was worthwhile using her work because I've been an astrologer long enough that I can translate a lot of times from a natal or a counseling position to a what we would call mundane position. Okay, I do want to start off by also talking about not just Barbara Hand Clow, but my teacher, Martha Lang Westcott, who does also really put some emphasis on Chiron. So let's talk about what is Chiron, the myth. Chiron, what does Chiron represent? Well, Chiron is the wounded healer. As a matter of fact, Chiron is a physician, an astrologer, a teacher, but he's a wounded healer, okay? So he starts off, I guess, as being lame. What he represents in astrology is alternative, okay? Alternative health practices, alternative ways of thinking. And I thought it was pretty interesting because I was an astrologer before Chiron was actually recognized. Chiron was found or cited for the first time November 1st, 1977. So I had already was practicing astrology when this Chiron came into being. At the time, we understood Chiron as being the presence that ushered in a lot of other asteroids. So the beginning of maybe the asteroid belt. Chiron is said to represent women, which I thought was pretty interesting, but in a way, it makes a lot of sense. Some people think that Chiron should be ruled by Virgo because of his act of service. But it's when you're reading it and you're looking at it, even in charts, it's the exception, it's the alternative, it's the in many cases, Chiron is also about how, because it's so alternative, that people don't always seem to think they have to follow the rules. Okay, so Chiron presents that alternative, but sometimes the alternative is the exception, and people will often have Chiron happen, will think of the circumstances as an exception, or that they somehow are an exception and don't have to follow the rules. So there's a lot of stuff with Chiron. Chiron happens to be, at the time of the finding, and I went out and did all my research, I realized that Chiron's very, very strong in my chart. Very, very strong. And as a result, not combustible, thank goodness, because Chiron can combust, like the sun too close to Mercury. When Chiron is too close to something, it can combust. So we don't really want a combusting circumstances, but I can tell you that I have always lived alternatively. I've always been involved in metaphysics, which is also something that is very Chironic because it is alternative. So I have always been involved in these things. I also think that maybe there's an exception to the rule with me because I've also, in my lifetime, never been able to work for someone else. Now, that's also some other things in my chart, But I think it rests a lot on the fact that my ideals from the beginning are quite alternative. And as a matter of fact, are only being somewhat recognized today, which always feels so good to me because I've been living with my personal ideals for a lifetime. And it's only within the last several years that I actually see, wow, other people feel the way that I do, particularly young people. So when I say that I've been waiting for young people my whole life, that's not an exaggeration. And I think that has a lot to do with Chiron. So Chiron is rather new to us. And when you think about how the woman's movement has progressed since the 70s, I can understand why Chiron is around women and that women are the alternative. So it really ushered in this feminine age, if you will. Now, understand that Chiron can go in and out of the universe too. So, because they have weird orbs, a lot of the asteroids have weird orbs. But how can I say this? It's here. So here's some of the notes that I've written. And just let me say this, Chiron is presently in about the mid arena of Aries. Chiron has a weird orb, so we can't say, oh, well, it runs this many years and then you're into the. No, Chiron's kind of a funny thing. I think it stays in Aries longer than some other signs. So that's one of the things that you want to note about Chiron is that it doesn't have like a normal cycle. Okay, so you definitely want to check that. As a matter of fact, she, in her book, she goes through when Chiron is in certain signs. And it's interesting because sometimes Chiron is only there for I think last time Chiron was in Aries, it was only 76 to 77. Okay, I actually have clients that have that one. But before that, let me go back. Okay. I do really, let me pick up this page. So I'm back, and I just want to show this to you because this is what I mean, okay? In 1918, it was only in Aries from April till October. In 1919, it was in effect January, and it never left until May of 1926. So, in other words, it was there 7 years. So, in 1926, it only leaves from May to October, and then it's back from October until March of 1927. And she makes a comment in here that there's a lot of issues with the older Aries, in other words, people that were born in the 1920s, letting go of their ideals so that the rest of us can move forward. And it's really interesting that I read that because I've been feeling that we have to wait for some things until people die. And I know that sounds really awful, but let's look at politics here. And let's look at the people in the American Senate that have been there for 100 years. Literally. I mean, we got people that are like 90 in government, which I think is wrong. And I do hope that somewhere down the road, young people realize that these people who are 90 are completely out of touch with what the world needs today. So they may have been great pioneers of their time, but their time has come and gone, and they're still resonating back to something that existed prior. And I'm not talking any political party, I'm talking old people, because old people have different ideals than young people, and they do. I'm in an age where I've noticed it. Now, fortunately for me, I've always kind of gravitated toward the younger because as an Aquarius, I'm very much ahead of my time. That may be true for a lot of others out there, but I really feel that when she said that, I was like, ding, 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 ding. Okay. So then it doesn't come back again until April of 1968, where it stays again till October. You see the pattern of 1968. Then it goes officially in January of 1969, just like it did in 1919. But now we're 50 years later. So so here again it stays from 69 to 1976, where it leaves again in May of 76 and doesn't come back until October of 76, stays there until March of 77. Okay. We're here again. Obviously, this book was written a while ago. All right. Now, I want to do the same thing for Taurus. She does this for every sign. I'm only going to do it for the first two just so that you can see this. From May to October again in 26, that's all there is. Okay. But then from March of 27, it will stay there until June of 33, when it will start bouncing around again. But realize that from 27 to 33 is only 5 years. So already 2 years less. That's what I wanted to really show about Chiron. It's a very weird orb. So it stops in June of 33, but then in December of 33, it will stay until March of 34. See, it goes back and forth, back and forth. And then for 2 months, it's out. And then May 29th, the end of May of 1976 to October of 76. So you see this May to October thing again. And then March of 77, it will stay there until 1983. So you see that 5-year period again. So it's really, Chiron is just so interesting. Okay. I want to see if, I think it's Sagittarius, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because Aquarius has 5-year cycles as well. But I think that it was Sagittarius that might be, and I'll tell you in a second. Here we go. 1901. Yeah. 1898 to 1901. 1948 to 1951. These are the longer cycles. Now I'm just picking the long. So 2 years. Okay. So it's in Sagittarius that Chiron doesn't spend any time at all, at least not up until the 1970s. I haven't studied the cycles since, because I'm studying now more the effects of Chiron. But it's just interesting. And one of the reasons why you're not going to find a lot of material on it is that it was only discovered in 1977. Although you would think by now we would be seeing a lot more about the wounded healer, about exceptions to the rules. You would think that all the things that Martha's been talking about, there'd be more. But I haven't really seen it. So that's why I'm doing the video. So let's move on with my notes. I just really wanted to get through the cycles. I wanted to show how it works. Okay, so in Aries, what they talk about, and again, we have to go back to the original, which is why I do this, the classic study of astrology and the original concepts of what things mean. In Aries, there is a search for identity. They need to identify with something in order to ground themselves. That's the Aries way. Okay? That's what it represents. All right? And so, again, remember that there was in the 70s a Chiron. So there's a lot of Chiron people out there. And you can get to know them because they're the people that will be asking questions of themselves like, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Okay? And it will be that which will ground them. Okay? Until they get the answers, they will be restless. Okay? So that's more of the natal. However, Let's look at that on a more mundane level because it's easy to do. Are we not all asking ourselves? I know that I have been, well, I've gone through a lot with the pandemic in terms of changing what I do, maybe even for a living. You know, I was actually doing much more physical work. I always do along with my astrology and tarot. It's only since very recently, and it literally since the ending of the pandemic, so around the time that it goes into Aries, that I started to think, no, I don't want to do the physical stuff. I have another purpose, and I think it relates to what I've been doing my whole life, which is astrology and tarot. So we're all doing it. Listen to your inner voice. You are asking, what is my purpose? What can I do? Okay, I think a lot of people all over the world are asking themselves that question if they're female and their health issues are on the line. Okay, I want to say reproductive rights, but realize that abortion issues is just women's health, period. Just so happens that's a big part of being a woman, but women's health. Okay, so one of the things now, the people who have it are known for, and I have clients, so I can say this is true, that they're trailblazers, and they also tend to be very, very courageous people. But what if we all have a little bit more courage right now? What if we all feel the need to blaze some kind of trail at this moment? I think that's true, and I don't think it matters where you live in the world. I think that I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it online with all the readers and all of the people coming out who do alternative work, Chiron work, if you will. It's really becoming almost as though it's a karmic question. And it is a karmic question. We all should be asking, what is our purpose? And we should all be restless until we figure that out. And I think that's true. Here's something else that's very true. This is the time of a warrior energy. Okay? It's a warrior energy. And it's about breaking down Saturnian structures. Wow. I think there's not one place in the world you can't relate to that statement. That what we are all doing is watching, if not even participating in, the breakdown of what has been our structures, particularly social structures. But the law is also part of this. And if, particularly in the United States, but I think this is a question in the world, I think China will be here in just a few years, where they're going to question. Okay, remember that we're only midway through something that can last 7 years. That's important to remember. Okay, when they break down, and this is very interesting with where the planets are today, which is another reason why I felt I could not do this, okay? So ultimately it breaks down Saturn structures, or that's what it's a part of. But we actually have Uranus doing that right now because of the squares that are going off and on between Uranus and Saturn. That's happening, okay? Taurus to Aquarius, that's happening, okay? But what's really cool is that Chiron wants to break down these Saturnian structures in order to be more closely aligned with Uranus. That is just incredible. Okay, freedom, humanity, equality. Those are the crying calls of Uranus. And I think that's what you're seeing. Right now, women are up in arms, not because they're all about ending pregnancies. I don't think that has anything to do with it for some people. I think it has everything to do with privacy and equality. Why are they doing this to women? They could do things to men, but they're not. Only women. So think about that in terms of Saturnian structures and aligning with Uranus, okay? The same thing, I mean, this is it in a nutshell, and we have to be able to see this, okay? The same thing with what they call CRT, which, by the way, exists. I'm a woman. I can attest to having felt the how do you want to say, the strike of CRT. Yes, women too are, there's a biases in our laws against women. And it's one of the reasons I will never be married again. I will not lose or give up my identity because we are not under the law equal. So it is very important for women to stand up for themselves no matter where you are in the world, because we are awakening the divine feminine. And Chiron is helping us do that. So cool. So cool. Okay. Okay. We're learning to be more disciplined, more organized. So here's our Saturn terms. Okay. But we're doing it in order to utilize and empower that Chiron energy, because it doesn't, the discipline doesn't come with Aries. It comes through other things that we have to look at. Okay. You know, interestingly enough, now, right now, Saturn is already beyond the Aries, but believe it or not, there's a sextile between those two. And there would be an inconjunct, a feeling of obligation that's occurring right now toward Uranus. So beautiful. Because remember that inconjuncts really relate to that obligatory kind of feeling. Okay. Now, if we don't go into action, we will be restless and we will be frustrated and restless unless we become active. God, it's so beautiful. Okay. I mean, I just can't even tell you how accurate this is. So it was first cited, as I said, in November 1st of 1977. And it started the idea behind body-mind healing. It started that concept of unity to heal and being healed, body-mind. It did. I was here. It was awesome. So, and I got involved in body-mind stuff immediately. So it's great. It's about understanding who we are, our own self-identification. That's what it is about. But we all have a part to play, no matter how minor, no matter how major, in what's going on around us today. We have a part to play in that. And you will feel restless till you get involved and frustrated. There's a need to ground ourselves, though, with this energy. And one of the things that they talk about is, you know, if you go from Aries, the I am, where people tend to ground themselves is very often in the grounding in Taurus. So it's the I own would be coming next. But remember that what we're talking about here in the modern age and in the age of Aquarius is not so much about what you own, but what you ethically and morally value. That's where you're going to ground yourself. Let me have one moment here. It's too loud. So I'm back. I know you probably can't hear it on these microphones, but I really can't stand the noise. So that's why I changed my whole office a while ago. Okay, so we want to ground ourselves, but where we're going to ground ourselves is in our value system. I don't want to put the whole thing on dollars and cents because we're leaving that last decant of Pisces, and which is Capricorn. We're leaving that Capricorn and we're moving into an Aquarian kind of setting. And so you really we are moving forward whether we want to or not. But if you're not moving forward, you are going to feel a restlessness and a frustration. One of the things that I wrote about in my notes that I thought was worth mentioning is that in the United States, that the Chiron in Aries is coupled with the Pluto return. And interestingly enough, Chiron is not squaring Pluto. They aren't squaring signs. And I'm not so sure that it will, because I think Pluto will move on before Aries actually gets there. But I do want to talk about how these things are playing out together. In the United States, the Pluto falls in the house of values, morals, and ethics. I'm not calling it the house of money anymore because I don't think that's appropriate for the new age. What we're really looking at is a deeper, bigger picture, which is what do we value in life? And I will tell you that I think that whether, again, I've said this before, whether people want to acknowledge this or not, in the United States, people are going to the polls right now. As a matter of fact, Pennsylvania's primary is today. I've already voted. And I always vote. And one of the things that I can say is that a lot of people, many of my friends and associates, are voting on their beliefs, their values. What do they value? And that's going to be very important to all elections moving forward. But I think it started even before we crossed into the new age. I think it was the tail end where it was already beginning, which was 2018, when we knew that there was bad things in our government and we needed to get them out. Well, that's still true. And those bad things are still trying to spread and they're still trying to take over, and we have to stand on moral ground. But I don't think here in the United States is the only place this is happening. I think we can say here it's happening and it's obvious because of our Pluto return. But we need to look at that Chiron. We need to look at what we value and what is our place in it. Okay? Chiron presently, at the moment, because I got to go there, is conjuncting Venus, which is the beginning of spiritualization of the value system. Now, when it first hits, there's a combustion period. Okay? So there's always that, oh, that happened here. That's been happening here. I mean, oh my goodness, in Pennsylvania, we've got people running from the GOP, not even from here. What the heck? One guy lives in New Hampshire and one guy lives in New Jersey. What? She's from Alabama. Nobody knows anything about her past. Or do you want somebody who's grown up here, raised here, started their political career here in Pennsylvania? See, there's a lot of stuff here we need to think about. Where do we want to be grounded? What do we want to ground ourselves around? It's very important. So it's the beginning of the spiritualization of our value system. Is it any wonder I don't want to use the word money as association with that second house? I don't. Because I don't want us to put so much stake and value into that, because that money concept is what leads to corruption and criminal activity, which, let's be honest, flows through one of our party systems like water. We need to look at that, and we need to ground ourselves in a better value system. So with that said, relationships right now, because it's Venus, very important, our relationships. They have to have a receptivity. That's why I keep hearing psychics saying, be around people who are like-minded. Yeah, I think so. But why? Because that's also what Chiron is expecting with its conjunction to Venus. We need to group together and make our numbers stronger. It also talks about how it can bring with them a spiritual concept. So we can be more, they always say, when more than so many gather in his name. I think that's a religious thing for Christians. Well, guess what, people? That's true no matter what it is. I believe all people should be equal. I believe the government has no business in our sex lives or our bedrooms. It's a spiritual concept. Leave them alone. Leave me alone. Okay? It's spiritual. Spiritual is in here. It's sacred. It's something that is, when something is spiritual, it's personal. It's deeply, deeply personal. Remember, body, mind, spirit, all one. Okay, so understanding, moving on. Understanding this, what we've just been talking about, is also meaning that when we get involved with people, whether it be an intimate relationship or a platonic one, we want to be aligned with this person on a spiritual level, which means there has to be a lot of sharing of ideology. I respect other people and I love unique people. Yeah, remember Chiron's really big in my chart. So I like alternative people. And what that means is that I, as a person, want to be around people who are not afraid to be who they are. Actually, that's something that people say about me. It's true. I know that I feel safest and the best when I'm around people that are maybe part of the LGBT community or situations that I put myself in where I'm a minority. I feel that that's really important. I really do. For all of us, great experiences. And that's spiritual. We all tend to look at rituals differently with this. We're going to look at a lot of things differently. We're already looking at childbirth differently. It's not about having children. We don't need laborers to work our farms. No, we got to pay for these kids. And in order to raise them right, you have to make certain things available to them, like education, proper food. And all of those things are more difficult because they all, here we go, cost money. And we live in a world where you don't get those things for free. So we have to look at ritual differently. Okay, and the churches are experiencing this right now as they're seeing a steep decline. Well, then again, if you go around as an evangelicalist and you talk about how great Trump is, I already say you're not a good Christian. Because a man who lies to the public 59,000 times is a liar and he's a thief. And you think he's Christian? No, he's not Christian. So, it's a really bad thing they did for the church. But the church was already in a decline prior to this. I think that's why they jumped on the Trump wagon. And the reason why is because we are looking at ritual differently. We are looking at religion differently. And in some cases, we're turning more to inner spirituality. We're becoming more metaphysical. We're understanding the book of Revelations where it says the laws of God will be written in the hearts of man. Not in the church walls, in the hearts of man or women or whatever you want to identify with. Or if you don't want to identify, but it's still in your heart because you're a human being. Let's say. So one of the things I want to do really quickly to wrap this up, because I'm right at my time and I don't want to spend too much more time on this, is that I do want to talk about it very quickly through the house structures. That when you have Chiron in the first house, you're still going to have Aries tendencies. You're still going to be looking at self-actualization. With it being in the second house, you're still going to look at values. Whether it's in Taurus or not, values will be very important to you. Ethics, morals. The problem is if it, as you get too fixed there, then you start thinking you're all that in a cup of tea. That would like almost be the ninth house. And everybody else is dog crap. Well, that's not true. Everybody has their own way because spirituality is a very individualistic thing. Okay. So the third house is, again, communication. It's about, again, this is another house like the ninth and the third. They're in the same line where don't get too carried away by your own opinions and what you know. Okay, because Chiron has a way of breaking down those structures. And also Chiron has a way of really affecting you through communication. Same thing where then you go to the fourth house where it be family, your roots, what you identify with as you came up in the world. Okay. What are you rooted in terms of upbringing? The fifth house would be expression of self. And this would be, a house where if you are LGBT community of any way, whether you're trans or you're just decided not to identify as anything in particular, that might be the fifth house that you might want to look at. The fifth house is also the house of love affairs and children and things like that. Okay, so you want to look at that. The sixth house is the house of service, alternative work directly in the sixth house, particularly because of the sixth and the 12th house. Chiron can be very spiritual, especially a 12th house Chiron. They're all about spirit, man. The problem with the 12th house is they have to be careful of getting too involved with gurus and teachers because they're too readily influenced. Not so much the sixth house. Okay, the seventh house, Chiron, you go for those alternative partners. I always say people with Chiron in the seventh, be careful because until you understand about Chiron there may be a tendency to go for alcoholics or drug addicts because they're alternative. But it really what you're looking for probably would be somebody who's more like an astrologer or a guru or a spiritual teacher of some kind. In the eighth house, Chiron is kind of funkadelic because there it deals more with, well, combined values, okay, but also, or combined resources, but also it's the house of, what do they say, death, sex, and rock and roll. So Chiron, I would expect to find Chiron there, maybe with somebody who's opted to be celibate even, okay? Break down the structures, identify with Uranus. But again, I'm just kind of rattling this off. I would recommend that if you want an in-depth analysis, and I'll continue, don't worry, look in here, okay? Chiron in the 10th means that this is a person who is probably some kind of guru and wants the world to see them as some kind of alternative. Whereas, like I said before, the 9th house is more about a bigger, like that's the political, spread the word. But the problem is that the 9th house is also a tendency to be too righteous, which is really funny that Chiron doesn't spend a whole lot of time in Sagittarius, which would be the most righteous of signs, because I don't think Chiron does well when it gets too righteous. So the 11th house would be your associations, your friends, the groups that you identify with. And as I said before, the 12th house is spiritual, just absolute spirit. The problem is that spirit has to find its way on its own. And after a while, anybody in the 12th house has to learn to separate from their teachers. I speak from experience. So with that said, I'm going to leave it there. If you wanted more information, the book is called Chiron, and it's Rainbow Bridge between the inner and outer planets. That's what she sees Chiron as, is the bridge. I actually see it also as a leader of asteroids. I'll even go one further. This is a very important discovery, Chiron. And Chiron is speaking to us right now in very loud ways if we just pay attention, open our eyes and ears, and listen. So with that said, I want to thank you for watching the video. I want to thank all of my subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope you'll consider becoming one. In the meantime, if you would, please like and share because they help the algorithms. And most importantly, comment because I love hearing from you. With that said, as always, I want to wish you only happy readings.